Outside of winning, what makes an organization a good home for a fan base?
Winning doesn't necessarily make an organization a good home for a fan base. I think what makes an organization a good home for a fan base is, well, I had one answer to that question, but I think it's the wrong answer. I really don't think that there is one answer for that, right? Like, when I've been thinking about organizational branding, I've been watching a lot of WWE. I don't really care about the wrestling. I care about the character development. I care about the narrative, the plot, right? Like, that's all really cool. And the trick about WWE, right, is that, like, nobody's really a fan of WWE. They're a fan of, like, individuals, right? I'm a John Cena fan, or I'm a CM Punk fan, or a Daniel Bryan fan, or an Undertaker fan, like, whatever. And it's kind of the same outside of there, too, right? Like, UFC has a lot of the same stuff. So I think in that there's a really good example to take from it in terms of creating a character and creating an identity that people can latch onto. So when I think about, like, why should fans support a specific organization or another, I think that's much more dependent on the organization and then who that fan is, right? Like, just like from my perspective as a fan, because I was a fan of esports before I ever got into working in esports, my ethos as a fan just never lets me root for TSM. I can't do it. Not because they're a bad organization, right? Like, TSM is a very particular type of organization, and something inside of me as a fan is just not aligned with that, right? Like, I really liked CLG, right? Not because CLG necessarily does things better than TSM, but just that identity appealed more to me, that kind of, like, underdog mentality. So as a fan first and then a team owner, my perspective is, look, I'm going to build a great identity for Immortals, and I'm going to execute on that identity really well. And then whoever feels kinship with that, the door's open. But if you get too general, if you try to be the team for everybody, you'll kind of lose the core pieces of identity that make you something special in the first place.
It's funny because almost every person in esports, in their free time, loves WWE. Like, that is the jam for everyone. It's great. I'm older, so I had the Jake the Snake, and I had all, like, the plush toys and stuff like that. But, like, WWE was WWF on, like, crack. They have refined it to, as you were talking about, the storylines. They have figured out the formula, and they have just repeated it, and it's great. People love it.
I mean, in the first 2 minutes of watching a WWE fight, if you've never watched it before, you automatically know what everyone stands for, who you root for, and who you feel the most alignment with. And like, I don't know if this is part of the interview or not, but, like, one of the reasons I care a lot about Dota is because I feel like TI did the exact same thing. I went to TI 6, never watched a game of Dota before, showed up at TI. Within the first, like, 3 minutes of a match, I knew, like, what's the characteristic of these teams? What do they stand for? Who am I going to root for? I don't even care about what goes on in the game of Dota, but, like, this is just so easy to understand and access and feel like I'm a part of it.
Is League doing that? Is Counter-Strike doing that?
I think Counter-Strike's really bad at it. I think League is also really bad at it, right? Like, League is a bit better. But honestly, like, most esports organizations are pretty lazy about their branding, including us, right? Like, I'm mea culpaing with the best of them. But I think Riot and teams need to do a better job of expressing to fans, why does this match matter, right? Like, what do we stand for when this is a fight between TSM and CLG? Like, it's not just special because it's TSM versus CLG and they've always been rivals. It's not just special because it's Doublelift against his old team. It's special because this is the Yankees of esports against the Red Sox of esports. This is, like, the behemoth versus the underdog. Like, you got to create timeless narratives, not just, like, metagame or roster dependent narratives.
So when you're going to be doing the rebrand or whatever with Immortals, is that dependent? Can you do that all within just the Immortals, or is that something that requires you working with the other teams and creating that narrative?
Well, I mean, that's one of the, unfortunately, WWE works so well because they can just script everything, right? Like, this isn't CGS.
LCS isn't scripted?
Maybe parts of it are. Can neither confirm nor deny. But, you know, for WWE, everything was scripted. For CGS, right, the Championship Gaming Series, that's what it was. Like, all the teams were kind of centrally owned and centrally controlled. So even though, like, the results weren't scripted, there was still a lot of room to tinker around with format. I think I think in the quest for authenticity, a lot of current esports tournament organizers try to be hands off too much in the way that they shape narrative and the way that they shape presentation and the way that they deliver content. So I think that there can be a lot more work done. Like the number one thing I've said to Riot about their content is like duos, drive. These are some of the best features in esports, but there's no central thread. Nothing connects a duos episode 1 to a duos episode 2 following completely different players other than, hey, it's 2 people in the first one and also 2 people in the second one. Like Drive, it's a fantastic content series, but there's nothing that links you from one to the other than the format being the same. And I feel like that's what's really missing in esports. Like there's no ladder of fandom, right? Like it's really hard to come in at this bottom rung of being a newcomer to esports and figure out how to get to that top rung, and we lose a lot of people along the way.
It's the same thing with like your gaming house where if you spend all this energy in getting this thing right of, this team, but then you're starting again with this one, there's an overlap. So with the duos, with those storylines, great, that's a nice little story here, but how does that connect here and then here and here, which would make an overarching, like a macro story that is, we're falling short with League. And
we use the term internally of content tapestry, right? Like first you gotta be able to link one episode of something to another episode of something and create a thread, and then you need all those threads to mesh together into something that's like beautiful from an outside perspective, but you can also zoom in and find little pieces of it that you enjoy too.
For more League interviews and analysis, subscribe to our channel. You can also find stats, discussions, and more on our website and mobile app at blitzesports.com.